Yeah, I'm going to talk about the perspective, so provide hopefully a developer perspective and talk about how we go about creating resilient communities and just some of the main interventions on our projects. So firstly, just a quick introduction to Frasers Property for those of you who don't know. So we're a diversified property developer active in um, residential, retail, commercial, and mixed use. We're owned by our parent company called Frasers Property, who are headquartered in Singapore, and they operate globally across 80 cities. Here in Australia, we're primarily known for the work we do within the residential space. Currently, we have about 8,000 homes in our pipeline, and we do everything from new growth corridor communities to high density infill developments and almost everything in between. So to kick off the presentation, I thought I would just start off with answering the question, what is resilience? So at Frasers Property, we have our own resilience policy and framework, and there we utilize the Rockefeller Foundation's 100 Resilient Cities definition, which is the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what kinds of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. So just delving into that a little bit. So acute shocks refers to risks that are rapid, expensive, unpredictable, and devastating. So in the context of climate change, these risks might be bushfires, extreme hot days, flash flooding, or storms. Chronic stresses, on the other hand, refer to risks that are slower, more predictable, but equally devastating. So in the context of climate change, this includes risks such as prolonged heat waves, higher average temperatures, drought, or increase and decreased rainfall. So basically, resilience is asking us to think about acute shocks and chronic stresses in combination rather than in isolation. In doing so, resilience bridges the gap between disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation by focusing on enhancing the performance of the system in the face of many hazards rather than just focusing on one particular event. So for me, that really gets to the heart of what it means for a system to be resilient. So the question then becomes, how do we go about enhancing the performance of a system in the face of both acute and chronic stresses and shocks? Um, so I think it's important to first think about the system. So at Frasers, we think about the system through two key dimensions. The first is that of operations, or the assets themselves. So this is all about the ability of natural and physical systems to perform properly when subject to an event. So it relates to the buildings themselves, but also to the public open spaces surrounding the buildings, and of course the broader infrastructure both within and outside the boundary of the site. And then, of course, which is often forgotten, is people and communities. So those who occupy and rely on these spaces and places. So they represent a separate yet highly important part of the system that is not given enough attention. So any attempt to improve resilience needs to focus on both of these dimensions. The other thing is that, as with anything, it's important to keep front of mind the ultimate outcome we're trying to drive by addressing resilience. It's not just addressing resilience for resilience sake. So the why for us as a property developer, it's really about our customers. So they exist at the heart of everything we do, and it's the common thread across the business. So therefore, resilience for us is really about improving the safety and quality of life for our customers in a way which is future-proof by considering not just the challenges now, but also challenges into the future. So this idea of an intended outcome framed with people at the center is really what gives teams within the business a common purpose from which to work from and which to work towards. So it's both the starting point for the conversation, but also the end goal. So how does Frasers Property design for resilience? So I'll spend probably the next few slides going through a few of the major interventions with some examples. First is blue-green infrastructure. So this is basically the interconnected network of natural and semi-natural areas, including water bodies and green spaces, which combine together to provide different ecosystem services. So it includes everything from swales, green roofs, rain gardens, to parklands, wetlands, and waterways, all of which are integrated in a very deliberate manner. So a good example of this is our development in Blacktown called Fairwater. So that's a residential master plan community. So at Fairwater, we have roughly 13 hectares of, I guess, what you would call blue-green infrastructure, and that accounts for roughly 33% of the site. So from a resilience standpoint, this is great for reducing the impact of flooding, as well as urban heat island effect. It's also great for treating and capturing water. But what's really great about the blue-green infrastructure, if you speak to those that live there, is that it really adds value to the communities from a health, well-being, and amenity standpoint. So these spaces are also vital for community development activities, which I'll touch on later. The challenges I have with blue-green infrastructure is that to do it properly, it often comes at the expense of land, which from a developer standpoint could otherwise be used for homes or increased yield. So blue-green infrastructure is increasingly more challenging the smaller the site. Next up is water efficiency. This is all about ensuring communities have access to a reliable water supply that can adapt and respond to change. Aside from reducing potable water through efficient fixtures and fittings, some of the more innovative ways of addressing this issue is through supply interventions. So at both Discovery Point up in Walleye Creek and Central Park, which I think a lot of people know about near Central Station, we worked with a company called Flow Systems to create a water recycling scheme which harvests wastewater from the residential apartments as well as retail to generate recycled water on site for toilet flushing, clothes washing, and irrigation. Both are operated as privately run water utilities, but they also have the ability to service neighboring sites as well. At Ed Square, which is right next to the train station, just not too far from Liverpool, we've instead decided to tap into the Hoxton Park recycled water scheme, which is currently under construction. So this is otherwise known as dual pipe reticulation, where recycled water will be supplied by the central plant through a purple pipe network, completely separate to drinking water pipes, and can also be used for landscape irrigation or toilet flushing. So the biggest co-benefit of having a reliable water supply is that your blue-green infrastructure is well maintained during times of drought, particularly parklands and green space, and residents are also less affected by water restrictions. So this is really important when it comes to talking about, the urban heat island effect. The challenges I have with these systems, particularly central systems, is cost. They're typically only made possible through some kind of grant or partnership with government or local council. And then, of course, energy efficiency. So this is a key component of any climate strategy to help reduce and optimize reliance on energy to keep our homes cool. So at Fairwater, again, we've installed geothermal heating and cooling for every single home within the development. So this operates exactly the same as a traditional air conditioning system, except instead of your outdoor air condensing unit, it's got that geothermal heat pump, and that is able to improve heating and cooling efficiency by up to 60%. Also, the benefit of that is that it's not spewing out hot air into the environment. In Victoria, we have a development called Life Point Cook, where we are going to be building a certified passive house. So this is a real learning experience for us as a volume builder. And if done well, this new home will need hardly any heating and cooling. In other words, the home will remain naturally cool in summer and warm in winter without any air conditioning. So by reducing energy demand and improving efficiency, communities benefit from increased reliability during times of stress, particularly when you start to consider reductions in peak demand. Most importantly, though, from a customer standpoint, households are able to save money. So that's where the real strong selling point is there. And then real utility. So this is something I thought I would add because it's quite unique to Frasers Property. So it's the name of our very own licensed energy retail business. So this is a supply side intervention which helps us to provide cheaper, greener, more reliable energy to customers. So it works through what's called an embedded network for the site, which we have full control over by basically putting a gate meter out front. And this means we're then able to buy energy on behalf of our customers and on-sell it to them for much cheaper prices. We can do this because we can firstly buy the energy in bulk, but also because we can utilize renewable energy on site, which we own and maintain, such as solar PV, as well as battery storage. So through this model, Real Utilities is able to distribute and sell energy at roughly 28% less than the average standard tariff charged by some of your larger electricity retailers. And through real utilities, we're also able to go all electric on all of our sites. So for example, our upcoming development at Macquarie Park, otherwise known as Ivanhoe Estate, will be 100% zero gas. This has the benefit of allowing for more reliable pricing and supply of energy to the site, particularly as the cost curves for renewables and storage come down. Next up is transport. So this one might seem a bit tenuous, but if you think about transport in the context of access and accessibility to the site, as well as the impact of roads and vehicles on an urban heat island, it's actually quite important. So by encouraging the use of a variety of modes of transportation, greater resilience can be achieved by providing alternative routes to the site, such as walking and cycling. However, this line of thinking then also starts to lead us towards just removing vehicles altogether and creating more space for landscaping, green alleys, and walkways. So again, our development there at Ed Square, that's a really great example of this, where we've created a unique townhouse product which allows for mews, which you can see over there. And these are basically streets that are heavily landscaped and designed to be shared with pedestrians as well as vehicles. And then last but not least is community development. So this is arguably one of the most important aspects from our standpoint. So all sites have a dedicated community development manager. And whilst they're not tasked with addressing resilience per se, the outcomes they are addressing, such as social cohesion and community connectedness, all work towards strengthening social support systems, which makes communities more resilient. And so this is why we have the saying at Frasers that connected communities are resilient communities. And all of these programs are grassroots and developed in consultation with the community based on their interests and strengths. So yeah, just to conclude, in thinking about how we can use good design to help solve all these issues, I think it's really important that we rely on these three core principles. So the first one is sort of what was alluded to before, which is that we need to take an inclusive approach to build ownership for decision making and bring stakeholders and institutions together to deliver integrated solutions with multiple benefits. Next is that we need to design assets and systems to be robust, provide redundancy and flexibility to withstand shocks and stresses, or use alternative strategies to facilitate rapid recovery. And then be resourceful. Be reflective, resourceful, come together like we're doing now, learn and improve. Thank you.